Okay, good evening and welcome everyone. It's now 5 o'clock and want to welcome you to the City of Victorville Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, September 13th, 2023. I will call this meeting to order and I'll ask for roll call, please.
Commissioner Marsh.
Here.
Commissioner Messon.
Here.
Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
Vice Chair Kirk Askins is absent. Chair Kirk.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. Next will be our invocation led to us by Commissioner Messon, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Marsh. If you'll please rise.
If you may all please bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for giving us the opportunity to gather here today. We ask that you continue to look over Kenneth. We ask that you please look over our other fellow commissioners, county staff, city staff, and their families, everyone here that's in the auditorium, and our residents. We hope for open dialogue, constructive and respectful dialogue in today's meeting. In Jesus' name, amen.
Please face the flag and place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up will be our general public comments section. This is the point in the meeting where if you would like to address the commission on any items that are not in tonight's agenda, now would be the time. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to us on general public comments? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing on general comments. Next would be the approval of previous minutes for the meeting of August 9th, 2023.
I move approval of the August 9th, 2023 meeting minute.
I second.
I have a first by Commissioner Thomas, a second by Commissioner Messon. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Marsh.
Yes.
Commissioner Messon.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Chair Kirk.
Yes.
Motion passes with Vice Chair Kirk Askins being absent.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move into our public hearing items. That was going to be agenda item number 2. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Chairman Kurth, fellow commissioners. Item number 2 is case PLAN 22-00017. It is a site plan and conditional use permit with a mitigated negative declaration to allow for the development of an express service car wash and restaurant on 2 vacant properties, zone C1, neighborhood services commercial. This is located at the northeast corner of Palmdale Road and Cantina Street. The applicant is requesting development of a 5-acre parcel, which is split into 2 phases. First phase includes a express service car wash. They've identified the end user as a quick clack car wash with a drive-through coffee shop on the separate parcel, which is identified as Dutch Brothers Coffee with drive-through. Altogether, the site's 5 acres. The first phase is 2.5 acres. The applicant has undergone a mitigated negative declaration. Through that process, we did receive comments. Those mitigation measures have been included in this site plan resolution, as well as the mitigated negative declaration. With that, I would like to point out that we have received a revision this evening that was printed for the commission. It's also been posted online. The engineering department is requesting some revisions to their engineering conditions for site plan resolution number P-23-017. These were to accommodate future traffic signal plans and also some corrections related to the width of cantina improvements and also drainage infrastructure along Palmdale Road. Our acting city engineer, Freddie Bonilla, is here if you have any specific questions about that. Also, in the rush before this meeting, there was a couple of conditions that were brought to my attention I want to bring forward to the commission for consideration. The applicant has identified a need to have longer hours of operation for the car wash. So should the planning commission approve this proposal, the applicant's requesting a modification to the conditional use permit resolution, condition of approval number 17, which currently only allows the car wash to operate during daylight hours. Staff, along with the applicant, are recommending that in addition to the revisions that are printed for you related to the engineering conditions, that we also modify that condition of approval to allow hours from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily. And just to give a little bit more insight on that, this project is not located adjacent to residents, so we don't believe that there will be any noise impacts. And then further, item number 4 on tonight's agenda is also a proposal for another car wash. That project is currently conditioned for hours of operations from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. That project on item number 4 is closer to residents, so we do believe the 8 p.m. cutoff is appropriate in that location. However, we would request your consideration for that revision to conditional use permit condition number 17. And then lastly, just some on-site circulation cleanup. We also would like to add a site plan condition related to the pavement striping and stop signs on site. There is an intersection that's, if on the slideshow, if you could bring up the site plan again. There's an intersection that's just north of the entry to the car wash. That right now is an unrestricted intersection. We are requesting that on the westbound lanes, that there would be a stop bar painted on the pavement along with a stop sign, just to further identify who has the right of way through that intersection. And with that, I'd like to read off the staff recommendation. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing, receive testimony regarding the proposed project, take the following actions. Adopt the attached mitigated negative declaration with a mitigation monitoring and reporting program for the project, and adopt resolution number P-23-016, approving the conditional use permit portion of case number PLAN 22-00017, subject to the attached conditions of approval with a modification to condition 17 to limit hours from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. and adopt resolution number P-23-017, approving the site plan portion of case number PLAN 22-00017, subject to the attached conditions of approval that are outlined in the revision packet that was submitted, along with an additional condition for stop signage as mentioned earlier. And with that, staff is available should you have questions.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Does the commission have any questions at this point for staff based on that report?
Well, what is the closest proximity of another car wash to that location?
That is a good question. Given the fact that it was so far from an existing express car wash, we didn't do that analysis. This would be the first express car wash along that 395 area of the city. I believe the closest one to this would be the Mr. Car Wash at McCart and Palmdale Road. And I was just informed that it's 3.5 miles away.
I just had a quick question on Cantina. Is that is going to be paved through? Because currently I believe it's a dead end street up. Is that I want to see that was mentioned as well in the revisions, or is that something that will be done at a later time should the project expand?
So there was a correction regarding the width of improvements. There is a requirement for them to improve the frontage, their frontage along Cantina. But as far as the extension further north of the property, that was not a condition.
The developer is required to complete frontage improvements along their frontage. It's a partially developed road that was constructed with the Walmart development. So now you'll have the full lanes of travel, you'll have the curb ramp. Additionally, they will also do a traffic signal modification to account for the additional lanes at that intersection.
Thank you.
I was just gonna ask to confirm that the proposed modifications, the applicant is aware of those. There's been discussions.
Yes.
I have nothing else. So with that, I will open up the public hearing for testimony, and we'll start if the applicant's here and would like to speak to us. Now would be the time. Hello.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Tab Johnson. I represent Rich Development Company, the developer of the project. My address is 600 North Huston Avenue in Santa Ana, California. And I'm here tonight to just answer any of your questions. We've been working very diligently and hard with both planning and engineering on the project. We think we've come up with something that works for everybody, and we believe it's the first phase of something that will hopefully complete that project after we get some activity going on there. It's been quite a history working with Caltrans to get that geometric done at the corner and how they want it and how it satisfies engineering. But I think we're there and we're excited about the project, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have. I agree with staff's recommendations on the additional conditions, and the hour of operations is what we've been asking for, so that's wonderful. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them for you.
Okay. Thank you. Does the commission have any questions for the applicant, Mr. Johnson? Okay, I don't think so. Thank you. Do we have any cards?
Only the applicant who just spoke.
Is there anyone else here that would like to speak to us on agenda item number 2? Seeing no one, then I will close the public hearing and I'll bring it back to the commission for a determination.
I move for approval of this item with staff's recommendations and the additional modifications and conditions that have been discussed today.
I second.
I have a first by Commissioner Thomas, a second by Commissioner Messin. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Marsh,
Yes.
Commissioner Messin,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas, Chair Kurth.
Yes.
Motion passes with Vice Chair Cook-Askins being absent.
Okay. Thank you and congratulations on getting through that part of the entitlements. Moving on to our next public hearing item, that would be item number 3. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Chairman Kurth, fellow commissioners. Item number 3 is case PLAN 22-00030. It is a site plan and conditional use permit with an environmental exemption to allow for the construction of a 74-foot tall wireless communication facility stealthed as a palm tree at the rear of a developed property zone C2 general commercial located at 15350 Roy Rogers Drive. The applicant is requesting approval of a standalone cell tower just north of the Winco Foods grocery store building on Roy Rogers Drive. The applicant has submitted a variety of studies that are attached to the staff report today. These include things such as the photo simulations of the proposed palm tree, also an alternative sites analysis also radio frequency statements and propagation maps. This proposal requires a conditional use permit by the City of Victorville's municipal code. And in doing so, staff has provided two options for the commission to consider tonight. Option A would essentially approve the project, but yet at a lower height of 42 feet. This would correspond with the height of an adjacent wireless facility located on the top of the roof of the Midtown Spectrum building just across the street from Midtown Drive. And option B would approve the project at the applicant's proposed height. There was two public comments from nearby property owners that were emailed to the commission, also posted online. Both of those comments from nearby residents, property owners, I should say, pointed out their opposition to the proposal, citing issues with aesthetics, property value, noise pollution, and health and safety concerns. We did in that response point out that the FCC regulations does not allow us to prohibit wireless facilities based on radio frequency, given that this is within radio frequency allowed by the FCC. Furthermore, they do point out the aesthetics of the proposal as a concern. I would like to point out that option A, staff feels would further conceal and make the palm tree look a little bit more appropriate for the site, given that a 74-foot tall palm tree in this area is unrealistic. 42 feet would be in more of a comparable size to the existing palm trees within that Desert Suns shopping plaza. We also received a follow-up letter from the applicant's counsel stating that denial of this proposal would violate the Federal Communications Act. And should the commission have questions regarding that, we can dive further into that. But essentially, the staff is providing option A, given the height is above what is seen for other wireless facilities in the area, and the applicant has stated that it would materially inhibit their ability to provide service in the area. There is a little bit of a disagreement there between staff's perspective and the applicant's. This really hasn't been vetted in the court systems yet on the definition of material inhibiting their operations. But staff again would like to point out that there is a facility directly across the street from Midtown Drive at the 42-foot height. Furthermore, I would like to point to back to the staff report and the conditions for the commission to consider. I would like to just read verbatim for the record the recommendations for both option A and option B. So bear with me here. Option A would include, well, let me read this off from the start. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing, receive testimony regarding the proposed project, and take one of the following actions. Option A will be approve the project with the wireless communication facility at a height of 42 feet. Find the project categorically exempt for CEQA section 15303, new construction or conversion of small structures, and adopt resolution number P-23-014, which is attachment A of your packet, approving the conditional use permit portion of the case number PLAN 22-00030, subject to the attached conditions of approval, and adopt resolution number P-23-015, attachment B of your agenda item packet, approving site plan portion of case number PLAN 22-00030, subject to the attached conditions of approval. Moving on to option B. Option B would approve the project with a wireless communication facility height of 74 feet as proposed by the applicant. If the commission were to approve this, staff would recommend that you find the project categorically exempt pursuant to SEQA section 15303, new construction or conversion of small structures, and adopt resolution number P-23-014, attachment C of your packet, approving the conditional use permit portion of case number PLAN 22-00030, subject to the attached conditions of approval, and adopt resolution number P-23-015, attachment D of your packet, approving the site plan portion of case number PLAN 22-00030, subject to the attached conditions of approval. And with that, staff is available should you have questions or comments.
Thank you for that. Any questions at this point for staff?
So just to clarify on the figures we were provided, we were provided various heights, and there will be coverage depending on the height. It's just the amount of coverage, correct?
That is correct. And the applicant has stated that the 74 feet is what meets their needs.
But there's still coverage regardless of whatever height.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Would the 46-foot height be sufficient to broadcast and receive for the applicant?
Based on what the applicant has stated in their comment letter, that is not sufficient for their needs. But I guess the question is, what is sufficient? And it's the sufficiency is in the applicant's eyes. The concern with basing a height on an applicant's business plan could set precedent for the city if we were to allow that type of argument to occur, because we could receive towers at 100 or 150 feet in height because that's what they need, that's what they want, that's the maximum coverage that they could have. Staff's trying to find a reasonable, fair, and balanced way to address the height, and that's comparing it to an adjacent cellular facility, which is at that 42-foot height, and also relating it to the aesthetics, which are more realistic to be camouflaged at a lower height, which is more comparable to the height of the palm trees in the center.
This picture depicting the tower here, I'm looking at the base going up to the top where the palm fronds are. Is it actually going to look like a tree, or is it just going to be a mechanical pole?
The applicant can speak more to that, but we have seen palm trees that look kind of exactly what you're seeing here in this photo simulation. Does it look exactly like a palm tree? No, because there's some antennas that are wrapped within the fronds, but they do their best to camouflage it.
Yeah. Well, I'm just concerned about where this is located. I believe it's on the back side of the property. Am I correct? It's not right up front, but then there's a lot of traffic in the area. That's over by Winco, I think.
Yeah, so it's in the back of the property. If you're referencing Roy Rogers as the front of the property. However, this shopping center has has frontage on multiple roadways, Amargosa and Midtown Drive. So it is fairly close to Midtown Drive.
I think I saw it in the staff report, but I can't look it up right now. Do you recall giving us any comparisons of some of these towers that may have been on the taller side in other areas of town, or is 42 feet it? That's the highest we've ever hit on previous approvals.
No, there has been approval of wireless facilities that are in excess of 42 feet. What staff was proposing with option A was to compare it to an adjacent facility that provides service for that area.
Mm-hmm.
But to my recollection, I do not believe we've had another palm tree of this height up to 74 feet.
Do you think that we've approved any like this around town that was between 42 feet and 75 feet?
There is a variety of cell towers throughout the community. I can't speak to all of them. I can say though that this is the tallest, disguised as a palm tree. But
Tallest
we've got,
proposed one.
yeah, but there's a variety of others from a fake windmill to a pine tree.
Yeah, I know there was some over by the neutral plant we did a number of years ago but I couldn't remember how
And then
tall those were.
the most least intrusive way to provide these facilities is on existing buildings or existing structures. So there are other facilities, multi-story buildings that have these antennas on them as well.
Okay, thanks. Okay, then with that, I'll go ahead and I will open up the public hearing. I'd look to see if is the applicant or representative here. Hello. Welcome.
Hey everyone, my name is Stella from Reliant Land Services and representing AT&T here today. And I would like to address a few questions that brought up. And first of all is the height that around the area. So AT&T has 3 existing sites around the neighborhood, which are a mile away. And one of them are on a monopole on Mojave Drive. And that is over 70 feet tall. And there's also another monopine along the Hook Park to the east. And that's a 55 feet tall pine tree. And also, so to address that T-Mobile site, T-Mobile, yes, we do acknowledge that T-Mobile has a site at the Midtown Spectrum, which has a 33 feet red center, which means that the red center is the middle of the antenna, which that's where they mount their antennas. And but they also have another site at Hook Park. That site has a 58 feet red center on a 70 feet pole monopole. So in terms of coverage, then they can sort of cover each other. So, but the AT&T sites, they are all over a mile away, and Hook Park to the Midtown Spectrum is only 3,000 feet. So that way that, they have a lot smaller coverage gap to work to cover, and AT&T in terms that is a lot bigger. I use the analogy of umbrella. So we need a bigger umbrella to cover a larger area. And T-Mobile, since they have smaller areas, so they can have smaller antennas, a smaller umbrella to cover it. So in order, if we need to or forced to reduce our height, and it would translate to, okay, we'll need more sites in order to cover the area that AT&T has a significant coverage gap. So I hope that clarifies a little.
I think that does.
Okay, perfect. And so what else? So the RF engineer, they provided a propagation map, and the propagation map had a study of different heights. What coverage that 70-foot pole, what coverage and 42 pole would provide. And for the 42 feet pole, that will lose a coverage of or surface of nearly 1,000 homes. And also, it will fail to provide adequate surface to business along and near Interstate 15 and Civic Drive. And it will not provide adequate surface to Hope Park and Hope Junior High. So based on those calculations, that's why we say that if we are forced to reduce our height to 42, that would materially inhibit AT&T to provide service. And so we strongly urge Planning Commission to approve option B, the 74 feet pole as proposed. So if you have any other questions?
Thank you. Questions for the applicant? Go ahead.
My question is, as far as the cell towers, are they shared or is independent use? AT&T can only use AT&T towers, or
We do share.
do you share towers?
Like for example, the T-Mobile sites at Hope Park, that they are mounted at 58 feet, and then the pole itself is at 70. I had approached SBA, who's the owner of the pole, if we can colo on that pole. So that same thing would happen here, or some other places, is that when AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, they look for sites, then the first thing they want to do is co-location, because it will be a lot easier to get approved. And so depends on what their objectives is, like how tall they want their antennas to be mounted, and they will approach or search the surrounding area and see if there's a co-location opportunity there.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to clarify that the two other sites you mentioned weren't AT&T's, but I think you just mentioned they were T-Mobile's.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
I just had one question. I was kind of curious. You know, there's been some talk about, you know, that obviously the higher you get up there, the more coverage you're going to get. Staff made a comment that kind of makes sense too. That said, hey, you know, are we going to be having some of these organizations ask for up to 100, 150 feet? I was just curious. The higher you go, the more coverage you get, but that's got to stop at a certain point. In your opinion, and I know it depends on topography and those things, but how high really could you go to get maximum coverage?
It really depends on where the RF engineers' calculations on where they want to cover. And I have been working on the site that's 120 feet tall along the freeway on the 15. That's because that's based on the topography, and also there's no surrounding site for AT&T to work with. Then they have to cover a larger area. That's why the antennas have to go higher. But is a limit on how high that tower need to be. And also when it goes higher or more coverage of the area, there's also a decrease of quantities or qualities, I should say, that because that you cover more area, then the more complaints may come in later on because you cover more population. So that's why then AT&T or other carriers would come in with what we call small cells. That is, you may have noticed that mounted on the street light poles, because their coverage is smaller, they're more concentrated, and then to fill in the areas that people complain that they don't have coverage.
So you're kind of saying that at certain heights, you might have a sweet spot to where it goes out and gets maximum coverage, but doesn't fall off and degrade.
Correct. And also we are, the network is line of sight. So we want to maintain the antennas about the same height so they can sort of provide a plane kind of coverage, then that is all the same around areas. And so that way then they work with each other. And so you don't want something that suddenly dropped and so they don't provide the same of coverage. And then basically it's later on, then more people move in, more people is going to complain, then the AT&T will have to find another site to build another cell towers, and which I think the city does not want. We want to limit the numbers of cell towers.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any speaker cards?
We do not.
Is there anyone else here that would like to speak to us on item number 3? Okay, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and I'll bring it back to the commission for any further discussion. I want to, I have a couple questions for staff, but I wanted to start and see if the commission has any follow-up comments or questions.
I had a question actually. I believe the staff report said the buildings in the area, the highest I think is at like 49 feet, or can you give us that exact number, what the highest building height is in that area?
Yes, I do believe you're right. Let me pull this up. I do believe that is at the tower at Winco. Yeah, that is the height of the top of Winco grocery store.
Thank you.
I would like to point out too that the rest of the parapet height is at 30 feet in height. The 49 is just at the main tower. Yeah.
And you said it's 49?
Correct.
Thomas?
No.
Okay, I was gonna not to put staff on the spot or anything, but the applicant made comparisons of some taller towers around the neighborhood there. Are we familiar with what those might be or when they were approved? Or I think she mentioned 70 some feet on a tower at
Yeah, so there was yes, there was 2 that she mentioned. There was an existing tower that's not camouflaged at all. That's been there for some time. I would say probably 30 plus years on Mojave Drive, just east of the freeway. And then she also referenced Brentwood Park. I believe that is disguised as a pine tree.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I think that is a differential too, because a palm tree is such a long, tall, skinny pole that might kind of stick out versus a pine tree, which can be, high and low, but not just a stalk or so. And that's a design thing we need to think about. I think the other thing we need to think about is the trade-off of possibly trying to keep these towers to a reasonable height, but then obviously as the applicant mentioned, is that kind of a trade-off to then needing to put more towers around the area to get that coverage that could have been done more in one shot. So I think that we need to take into consideration as well. I think I don't know what the commission's feelings are on this, but before you do a motion, I feel like I should say, I'm very cognizant about setting the precedent with this city. Like was mentioned during the staff report, that if we, just start saying, hey, it's what the business needs, that's what they say, the propagation maps say 70 some feet, then I guess we better do it, or some people aren't going to get adequate cell service according to their, data that they gave to us. On the other hand, this could set that precedent that, you know, here we are, everyone should be 72. Why does one get it and the other one doesn't? Because of course everyone wants maximum coverage. So I'm wondering, is there, and I might get staff's thought on this, is there a happy medium to say, be somewhere in between that full height and the 42-foot requirement? And I bring that up because I looking at the site, those palm trees are pretty tall, and that not just the parapet, but the roof point is 49 feet. You know, if there was a palm tree that was, you know, 10 feet higher than that, I feel like it's still within realm of the high palm trees. It's not just head and shoulders so much higher above. Is that something that staff, do you feel that we would be setting some kind of precedent if we made findings that because of this site, because of the existing palm tree, it's a unique circumstance?
You do bring up a good point. I do believe that we're entering discussion that after we have this, you should open up the public hearing again to hear from the applicant.
Okay.
But to reference what the applicant stated, one of their more recent co-locations was at Brentwood Park. I believe the applicant referenced a total height of antenna at 55 feet. She can correct me if I'm wrong. But if that is the case, if you look at the site plan graphics, if the commission wished to find a happy medium or a compromise, and again, I would want you to get the feedback from the applicant that lowering it to a height of 55 feet to be comparable with their Brentwood site, which they said that they like to keep those heights about the same. That would lower it from the antenna height of what they're proposing, which is 69 feet, down to 55 feet. That would drop the antenna height to by 14 feet. Keep in mind, though, that there is an extension of the fake palm fronds that extend 4 feet beyond that. So I would recommend that we get the applicant's feedback on it.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. Any other comments yet on that? Or would you like?
Go ahead, no.
I had a quick comment. Personally, just driving through those areas, it's pretty bare. So as you mentioned, I think at a pine tree in a park, it's a lot different than seeing a palm tree in a desert landscape. The shopping center in general has a decent amount of palm trees that are nowhere near that height. So I am curious to see what the applicant would say as well about finding a middle ground with the height. However, at least a 70-foot, 60-foot, I think is a bit outrageous, specifically for that area. And it does provide coverage. May not be the coverage that's intended, but there is coverage. It's not like we're denying coverage in general, which is also something that was mentioned in the studies. But that's all.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to open the public hearing back up, and would you like to come forward again? And I'm sure you have some thoughts now that you've heard us mention some of these possibilities. And
Actually, the RF engineer had already thought of that ahead of time. So I don't know if you guys have this publication map.
we do in our records here. I just didn't. I wasn't able to skim through, but
So I want to point out, this is the proposed antenna height is red center is 65. So this is the coverage that they're going to provide.
that's at 65,
That's at 65.
and that's center
The
center of the
yes.
antenna.
We usually talk about, when we talk about the antenna height, we usually talk about the center of the antenna. So it really doesn't matter to the RF on how tall the support, the antenna support structure is. So 65 is the antenna, middle of antenna, that's where they mount it. And this is the antenna at 36 feet. So you can see the significant difference between this and that. That's what we talk about when we lose 1,000 families. or homes. And so they did another one that is at 51 Red Center. So it compared to what we're proposing, you can still see there's pretty big difference that especially the green part. The green portion is in-home indoor interior coverage, that when you're inside, that how good your coverage is going to be. And so this one at 65 Red Center and this one at 51. So 10 feet difference, then you can see how much the green portion shrank compared to that. So that's why when we did the propagation map, when we say, okay, we need this height, it's not because we just want that, it's actually based on science that they did study. And so that's why we propose that at this height. And we did consider the height limit of the area. So when I first approached the property owner, I had asked them if we can go on their building to provide antennas, and they said no, because they would not like a third party to go on their roof. So that's why that if we want to stay at this property, then the only option is to have a standalone project. And also because their building is at 33 feet, when we lower our sites to 42, some of the antennas is going to be blocked by the adjacent building. And that's why that it definitely have to go higher. The 42 is just not an option.
Okay, thank you. Any questions while public hearings open?
I do. What is in vehicle coverage? Because it has that labeled too. So what is it in vehicle coverage? It has it labeled in the yellow. So what is it? Just driving around, you have coverage? Like what is, can you explain that? You explained the in-home, but what's the vehicle?
The RF engineer had a explanation on this. So the green, which is the indoor signal, in general, the areas known in dark green should have the strongest signal strength and be sufficient for most in-building coverage. However, in-building coverage can and will be adversely affected by the thickness of construction types of the walls or your location in the building. That is that if you are inside the building more compared to if you are staying at the window. And then so in vehicle signal, the area shown in yellow should be the sufficient or on street and in the open coverage. Most in vehicle coverage and possible some in building coverage. And then there's also outdoor signal. The area shown in purple should have sufficient signal strength for on street and in the open coverage, but may not have it for an vehicle coverage and indoor signal coverage. So the best is the green. Then when it comes to the yellow is the second that we can, if you're in the vehicle or outside, you probably would have coverage. And then in purple, you may not have coverage when you're outside.
Are there any, I guess, technology plans or advancements that in some time in the near future that would enhance your signal going out? We're having more and more devices come online, and it would seem that to handle this increase, I do understand that you need, height and so forth to get it out, but are there any enhancements coming along sometime soon? It doesn't affect this now, but that
right now, I am working on, other than new site builds, I will also work on modifications of existing sites. So right now that they are proposing or having to change antennas, before we have 3 or 4 antennas per sector, which means per direction. And now they are proposing 5 antennas. So they're going to use C-band, 5G. And so the way they work on it is that instead of 1 8-foot antennas, they have like two smaller antennas in order to cover the additional demand. So from what I have seen is basically they're just increasing the number of antennas.
Thank you.
So with that increase, okay, you're talking about expansion of the antennas and stuff to gain coverage or to make it get adequate coverage. So does the height difference matter then? If from 42 to 70 to what say 42, if you have more antennas, then aren't you getting the coverage that you're looking for?
I don't think the RF works that way because the new antennas is for additional frequencies that AT&T purchased from the government, and so in terms of providing additional coverage is that they also use different a more spectrum of frequencies. That way, that more customers will be covered.
Oh.
So it's frequency, height, and number of antennas.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close the public hearing once again. And bring it back to the commission for any more discussion or determination. I still feel, thank you for the information, and I feel like in this case, I feel like we'd be able to make a finding that we could go a little higher than 42, get them up over that top point of the roof at the 4950 mark, and get somewhere in between the what I feel is up there in the 70 some, but maybe be in at the 60 or something like that, just so we don't have as much of an issue with any kind of precedent. If another site comes along that has these same similar characteristics, I think I'd be okay with it there too. But in some cases, I would not. Kind of want to know what the commission thought, or if somebody wanted to make a motion.
I have a question for staff. Does the facility height at 42, is that with the antenna being at 42, or is it the base and then where would it put the antenna?
That is the overall height. Based on this type of stealthing method, there's a 6 foot difference between the total height and what's been referred to as the rad center, the center of the antenna. So in the case that the applicant brought up, I believe she stated the other tower to the west of this facility was at a rad center height of 51 feet. So if the commission wanted to look at a compromising height, you would add 6 feet onto that.
So then if we were to do the height of the Linko 49, then it would be at what, 43? The antenna would be the additional 6.
Correct.
Which puts it closer to that top map.
I do think that I see the applicant raising their hand. Maybe it might be better to them to chime in.
Yes. Okay, I'll open the public hearing again. That's okay. Thank you.
So if we are going to have 51 rec center, assuming that we're going to use 8 foot antennas, so we plus 4, that would be the top of the antennas, and which is also the top of the pole. So we are using a palm trees. We will add 5 feet of palm fronds to make it more naturally looking. So you are saying if we're at 51, that's 55 of top of antenna and pole, and plus 5 feet of palm fronds. This would be 60.
And then if we did 45, we would put it around 50, 51.
If 45 feet, overall height?
Yes, not like the rad center, and then the tip being that first 50s. So if you put the rad center at 45 and the tip at 50-51, that's how that would work, right?
If the red center is 45, tip of antennas is going to be 49, and then we also add 5 feet of palm fronds, so that it would be 54.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to clarify what he said earlier. I believe I was looking at there's multiple rad centers. The applicant, when they're stating the overall height of the antennas, is 8 feet. So if you go from the center of those antennas, the current proposal is at 65 feet center. And then when you add the additional to get to the top of the antennas, that's another 4 feet at 69 feet, and then another 5 feet on top of that. So from rad center to top of the palm fronds is 9 feet. So when you're contemplating a compromise, you would add 9 feet
Mm-hmm.
if we use the same stealthing technique.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll close the public hearing. I personally think we can just get that rad center just a little bit over the height of the building peak, just a little bit. And whatever that number is, we should get sufficient coverage. It's a little higher than our code. And then just add 9 feet onto that for the second half of the antenna and the 5 feet of fronds. So I don't know if it was at 55, it would be 64 total. If it was at, yes, you can. I'll open the public hearing.
When we talk about height, there's some other factors would have to factor in. For example, because we are right next to the building, and then the building itself is at, can they remember? Let's say the building is at 30 feet, right next to a tower. And then if the red center is only at 33 feet, we are using a 8-foot antennas. The bottom of the antennas is going to be only at 29. So which means that the antenna's signal will be blocked by the 30 feet tall building. So the bottom of the antennas will have to be at least 2 feet higher than the adjacent building. And also the other factors would affect it is because when your antennas is right next to the building, even though it's just high than a little bit taller than the buildings, but if the building is a long building, that means that the antenna signal is just going to be affected by the building as well. So it's like when I'm at a table, I can reach over, but if I'm stepping back, my hand will still be on the table, but not over to get where I wanted to go. Does that make sense?
So then if we did 40 feet, you do 4 feet for the antenna, 5 feet for the leaves, which puts us at 49, and then an additional 2 to go over the building at 51 to be above the building.
Depends on how tall how wide the building. Because as I try to explain, my goal is to.
So it's not just height anymore; it's width too.
Yes, when we are right next to the building, which is what happened to this site. That because we have a the supermarket right next door. If there's no supermarket, then we can just talk about if we want rest center at 30, then we just add 9 feet. But because we are next to a building, that the 30 feet of a difference would be would affect the height of the rest center.
Even though the building's only to your left and not to your front and to your right.
Correct. And because the antenna, if you look at the site plan, I think it shows where the antenna is shooting to. I think the antenna one, they're shooting this way, that the building is right here, but these two antennas is going to be affected by the building.
Okay, thank you.
This is the last time. Sorry about that.
Oh, thank you for that information, and I'll close the public hearing. Is everybody doing their math right now, or what?
I guess just for comment, just looking at the coverage differences in the and in their studies between a tip 55 and a tip 40, I honestly don't see much of a difference personally. That's just what I'm looking at. And I thought maybe doing 40 up and then the 40 plus the 4 for the antenna, the 5 for the leaves, and then the 2 for whatever at 51, I thought that would be fine given that the building's at 49. But since there's other stuff involved, I guess I defer to staff on that now because I don't know how we determine. I don't know how we meet a middle at that point now because I thought that would provide sufficient coverage. but I
Commissioner
guess-
Messon, what was your number that you just said that would be the center of the?
So 40 would be the rod center. The tip would be 44. We add 5 for the leaves at 49, and then an extra 2 feet, given the number she just gave us, for it being above the building to provide that coverage above, putting it at 51. It's 2 feet above the current building. So that's at least what I thought would be a good number if we want to accommodate. Yep.
And I kind of did my math a little bit there, a little bit different, just because I know the top of the building is 49 feet. So then they said they would like to have 2 feet above any of those kind of structures, so that'd be 51. Then you add the 8 feet of the antennas, plus the 5 feet of the fronds. And so that would put the center right at 55 with a total height of 64 at the tip of the palm frond, and then that would at least give what the applicant has claimed, that it needs to be at least two feet above the whole antenna needs to be 2 feet above the building. And I'm not set in stone on any of this. I'm just trying to find that middle ground and still be able to make findings that, you know,
Rob, did you read 55? 55
that would be 55 at center
center, right?
of the antennas, and that would give them their full antenna plus the 2 feet buffer over top the highest part of the roof. I think.
I guess for me, I mean, my understanding, just listening to, all the descriptions and everything, is that basically we're looking at 42 and 74, because everything in between the applicant is saying is not going to work, or it's not going to be adequate because there's more than just height. There's width, the size of the building, the overall size of the building. So we're kind of looking at just those two. My perspective, I mean, with my thought process is we were looking at just those two, height levels, either 42 feet or 74 feet.
I think either way, we don't, according to the applicant, if we don't go to the full height, they're building extra towers probably anyways, to fill in coverage. But I don't want to defeat the whole purpose by having it behind lower than the top of the building line. Then it maybe be back to the drawing board. I think having that palm tree, it looks similar to the other palm trees. Their proposal was just a little too high. It just wasn't quite right. If we could, meet in the middle there, I personally think that'd be okay.
give us your numbers again. I'm still calculating here.
The one I read off?
Yeah,
Oh, and tell me if this is right or wrong. The height of the roof is 49 feet at the tallest point. They need 2 more feet before their antennas start, so that would put it at 51 feet. And if the antennas then are 8 feet tall, that would put it at 55 for the middle of the antenna. And then the second half of that antenna is up another 4 feet, plus the 5 feet of fronds would be a total of 64 if the center of the antenna was at 55. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry.
I'll open up the public hearing.
May I suggest to continue so that I can go back to the RF engineer and have them look at the suggested height, and so I can come back to the planning commission and have a definite answer whether that would work for AT&T. So that way, then we don't have to be here and guessing what the height that would work for AT&T.
That sounds fair. If the commission decides to do that, then that at least you have some information now on record of where we were kind of heading,
Right. Yeah.
and might be able to make other
So I can work
other
with
arguments or find a resolution or something, because yeah, you're right. We're kind of guessing at this point. We're not RF engineers, so but we have to respect our code and our setting the precedent.
exactly. Yeah.
Because we'll be seeing more of these coming through. It's not going to stop.
Right. So 2 feet was just a rule of thumb that I have learned along the way.
Right.
I'm not an RF engineer, so I can't tell for sure. But the first thing I would like to ask, do we agree on a palm tree, or do we want to change the design to a pine tree? No, palm tree is still good? Okay, so I can go back to the RF and see what if they can lower the height of the tree.
Yeah, palm tree is fine, because everything else around there is palm trees. There's no Christmas trees, the evergreens or whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you for that information and that suggestion. And I'll close the hearing.
Thanks.
And Chairman Kurth, if I might, I would like the applicant's concurrence. Sorry, you may have to reopen the hearing on this, but since the applicant mentioned a continuance, I would recommend that, given that there's additional analysis that needs to occur, that we, if the commission wants to continue this, that we continue it to the November 8th planning commission meeting, and that if that is something that is agreed upon, that you ask the applicant if they're also agreeable to that.
I'll open up the public hearing. Did you hear that? We're suggesting a possibility of a continuance if it gets voted on to November 8th meeting of this year.
I actually do not need that much of time, I think, to go back to RF. Then they can provide information faster. So
Do we have
if you
any
want to-
ability to?
But that would be staff's recommendation, and I know that may not be the preference
Because of the load.
I'm just wanting to, if that is amenable, that they would agree to it. Just because shot clock issues, I want to make sure that the applicant would be agreeable.
Sounds like there's a reasoning for the November 8th. So do you think you'd be in agreement if we did continue to that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, which means that actually we are at the end of shot clock already. So I think that the city attorney. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. I think the last time we already provided a tolling agreement. So
I'm trying to remember what the end date of the tolling agreement was. So if we need another one, we can do that.
okay, I will ask AT&T's attorney to provide the.
Yeah, I thought I had it here, and I'm just looking around for it. Do you recall? Was it just through today, or was it 60 days, or?
I don't recall. But that was the reason why I wanted to.
Yeah, that's
ensure
me
that the
too, because I
applicant
know
was
we have
okay
a
with
shot clock issue, and I'll make sure everybody's on
I
board.
think the tolling is ending the end of this month.
This month?
Yeah, if I remember correctly.
I just got confirmation that it's ending tomorrow.
Oh, God.
So yeah, we would, but with the applicant's concurrence, planning commission wants to continue to November 8th. It shouldn't be any issues.
Okay, we'll just provide another tolling agreement. then.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, and I'll close the public hearing. a- Anybody want to questions or make that motion?
I'll motion to continue the public hearing till the November 8th meeting.
I second.
I have a first by Commissioner Messin, second by Commissioner Thomas. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Marsh,
Yes.
Commissioner Messin,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas, Chair Kurth.
Yes.
Motion passes with Vice Chair Cook Askins being absent.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry that we couldn't get it done tonight, but hopefully we can get to a good resolution and get you back on track. Thank you for your patience. That moves us on to agenda item number 4. Staff, please.
Thank you, Chairman Kurth. Item number 4 is case PLAN 22-00034. It is a conditional use permit to allow for a C1 neighborhood service commercial uses within a R1 single family residential zoned city initiative area, a site plan and a conditional use permit with an environmental exemption to allow for the development of car wash use, a conditional use permit to allow for a drive-through restaurant, and a parcel map to subdivide 2 parcels into 4 parcels. This is located at the northwest corner of Hook Boulevard and Amargosa Road. The applicant's proposing a one-phased project, and what you see in front of you is the landscape color site plan, which shows the proposal including an Aldi Foods, an Express Car Wash, which is identified as a Mr. Car Wash at this point, and also a Chase Bank. There is a Pad 3 drive-through with the applicant intends to develop. However, due to the existence of a Western Joshua tree at that time, the applicant has included this as just a empty restaurant pad. At this point, they have not identified the end user for that location. The property is within the initiative area. This is a ballot box zoning designation that was instituted in the 1980s. The main purpose was to preclude zoning of multifamily in the area. However, a municipal code through a conditional use permit allows commercial uses to occur within this initiative area should the commission approve that conditional use. Other conditional uses that were approved in this initiative area include the dialysis center that is just north of this site. Another conditional use permit is the car wash. The Planning Commission in recent years did adopt a policy to further guide developers on appropriate locations for these type of facilities. The applicant on face value does comply with all of the requirements except for the separation from a nearby residence. It is located within 300 feet of the closest residence. The policy does state that it can be located within that area if it proves that it doesn't have impact to the residents through such things as light and noise. The applicant has provided a noise study that shows that the decibel level does meet our municipal code standards, and through a variety of site design issues has further mitigated that impact. I would like to note that the exit where most of the noise would be coming out of is facing south away from the residence. The last conditional use permit proposed is for a drive-through restaurant. That is located on that pad I mentioned on the southwest corner of the site. It is located within 100 feet of residentially zoned property, therefore requiring that conditional use permit. The staff report analyzes how through landscaping and separation from the nearby residents that it does serve to be an appropriate use. And the last application, along with the site plan, would be a parcel map to further subdivide parcels. I would like to point out we did receive a revision. Pull it up here real quick. Given the sensitivity of the site being adjacent to residents, staff has distributed additional site plan conditions. This would include the requirement of a decorative block wall along the northern property line. The applicant already did propose that, but there was some discrepancy between some of the plans. So conditions 43 and 44 of the site plan would further clarify the requirement of a 7-foot wall along the northern property line. Also, condition 45 would be added to clarify to the applicant that all freestanding or wall-mounted light fixtures would be directed downward to prevent spillage onto adjacent property. And with that, I'll go ahead and read the staff recommendation. The staff recommendation is that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing, receive testimony regarding the proposed project, and take the following actions. Find the project categorically exempt under Section 15332 of the California Environmental Quality Act, entitled Infill Development Projects, and adopt resolution number P-23-018, approving the conditional use permit portion of case number PLAN 22-00034, subject to the attached conditions of approval. Adopt resolution number P-23-019, approving the conditional use permit portion for the drive-through for case number PLAN 22-00034, subject to the attached conditions of approval. Adopt resolution number P-23-020, approving the conditional use permit portion for the core wash, case number PLAN 22-00034, subject to the attached conditions of approval. Adopt resolution number P-23-021, approving the site plan portion of case number PLAN 22-00034, subject to attached conditions of approval with the revisions that were provided tonight. And lastly, adopt resolution number P-22-022, approving the parcel map portion of case number PLAN 22-00034, subject to the attached conditions of approval. And staff is available should you have any questions.
Thank you for that report. Any questions for staff? Okay.
I had a quick one. Given that this is an initiative area, were any letters mailed out to nearby residents?
Yes, for public hearings, all of the public hearings that have a project site, all of the properties within 300 feet were notified. And this project, we did not receive any comments.
Thank you.
Okay, then I will open up the public hearing. Is the applicant or representative here? Welcome.
Good evening, Chairperson Kurth and fellow commissioners. My name is Ralph Deppish. I represent the developer, Sage Invesco. And first and foremost, I want to thank the city, various departments from planning to engineering and others to work with us on a collaborative effort over these last 18 months or so to come to a project that I'm pleased to present before you this evening. The project does provide services to the community that we think will be well received. It does provide substantial employment opportunities for the community as well, in excess of 125 employment opportunities, plus the tax increases from the property and sales tax. But most importantly, I think it's a well-designed property that will serve the community well on this vacant piece of property that we're looking forward to hopefully being approved this evening and moving forward with this development. Here to answer any particular questions you may have as best I can. Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? None. Thank you, Mr. Debish. Do we have any speaker cards?
We do not.
We do have somebody that would like to speak. If you'd like to come up, if you could give us your name and your address for the record.
Hi, my name is Gregory Dan. I live at 16677 Lilac Street in this area. Grew up in this area. My aunt still lives off Ashley Glen, just up the street. I work for a local developer. How I heard about this project, and I think it's a great project for the area. Really nice design. And I know this has been a difficult property. There's been 3 or 4 other developers that have tried to develop here. So it's nice to see someone who has brought such nice plans to the area, wants to build a project that offers so many jobs and services to the local area. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to us on item number 4? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for a determination.
I'll make a motion to adopt agenda item number 4 according to staff recommendations and also including the revision, the staff revision.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a first by Commissioner Marsh, a second by Commissioner Thomas. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Marsh,
Yes.
Commissioner Messin,
No.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Chair Kurth.
Yes.
Motion passes with Vice Chair Gaskins being absent and Commissioner Messin voting no.
That has passed. So congratulations on that project. Thank you. And next up, we'll be going into our development standards workshop. If you want to kick that off, Mr. Webb.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. As our assistant city engineer briefed the commission at our last meeting, he's returning again to give an overview along with associate planner Daisy Kawasaki. So I'll hand it off to Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, agenda item number 5 is case number PLN 25-00025, a planning commission workshop to discuss proposed development standards for existing zone districts and new mixed-use districts included in case number PLN 23-00025, which overall is an amendment to the Victorville Municipal Code with an environmental exemption, introducing various changes to Title 16 to address the recently adopted land use element of the general plan, including but not limited to updated development standards, implementation of new zone districts and overlay districts with an updated land use map, and other associated changes. As previously discussed as new business items by the Planning Commission, this workshop is the first in a series discussing an amendment to the development code that will implement the land use and housing elements of the city's general plan. Specifically, today's workshop deals with development standards for existing zone districts and the city's new mixed-use districts in order to accommodate updated residential densities and non-residential development intensities that are outlined in the land use element of the general plan. Included in this item are draft updates to many of the city's existing development standards for residential, commercial, and industrial zones, and new standards for mixed-use zones, which implement the general density and intensity requirements outlined in the general plan. Additionally included are definitions and design guidelines that are used to clarify the intent and applicability of the development standards that were drafted for your review. We did include a recommendation, which I'll put on the record now, It is that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing, receive testimony regarding the proposed project, and take the following actions: provide feedback to city staff on any recommended modifications, inclusions, or deletions to the draft development standards for existing zone districts and new mixed-use districts, and recommend that city staff proceed with preparing the draft development standards for adoption, incorporating adjustments recommended by consensus of the Planning Commission. Before any action is taken, though, staff has prepared a staff report, and Associate Planner Daisy Kawasaki is here to highlight the main points of the draft development standards that have been prepared.
Thank you.
Good evening, good evening, Planning Commissioners. We've prepared this brief presentation to you to supplement the staff report that you've received for this workshop item. In it, we've outlined proposed development standard modifications and some new development standards that correspond to a future municipal code amendment that is needed in order to implement the recently adopted land use element and housing element of the city's general plan. We've broken this presentation down into 4 parts. To start, I will provide some background on how we've gotten to this point and what we've already approved. Next, we'll discuss updates to zone districts and their corresponding development standards. And finally, we'll end with some examples of the types of projects that can be accomplished with this type of code amendment. So, as noted in the staff report for this item, the city adopted updates to the land use and housing elements of the city's general plan at the end of 2022. Within these updates were a series of programs and policies intended to reduce barriers to residential development, encourage a wider variety of residential development and housing types in the city, including the introduction of mixed-use project allowances, and increased density allowances for residential developments. This is what brings us here today. In order to codify and implement these goals, the city must now amend the Victorville Municipal Code and zoning map to further clarify the rules, regulations, and development standards applicable to each general planned land use designation, and to further designate areas of each land use designation into separate zoning districts. This table is intended to show the previous land use designations versus the current land use categories that were changed by the 2022 land use element update to the general plan. As you can see here, and what we'll be discussing in depth later on in this presentation, were mainly changes to the residential land use categories as they relate to dwelling unit densities, as well as the expansion of the mixed use designation. This table is meant to highlight some of these specific changes and illustrate how these changes will be implemented in the updated zoning ordinance. We won't see much change proposed until we get into our multifamily zone districts, including the R2, R3, and R4 zone districts. Existing R2 zoned properties will remain zoned R2, but excepting for density maximums will take on standards currently associated with the current R3 zone district. R3 properties will take on current R4 standards, which now allow for development up to 20 dwelling units per acre. And the proposed R4 standards are completely new and meant to facilitate a larger multifamily development with a maximum dwelling unit density of up to 30 dwelling units per acre, which is not something that the city of Victorville has had allowances for under standard zoning code. We'll discuss this more later on in this presentation. We also see here how the existing mixed-use district has seen a reduction in maximum residential density allowances, but will result in 2 completely new mixed-use zone districts with all new development standards. Historically, the old mixed-use zone had essentially no development standards associated with it and relied on the implementation of a planned unit development, or PUD, to create project-specific standards. This update will result in specific development standards to be established for the new MU1 and MU2 zones, which we'll discuss later on. The new and updated development standards that are proposed here will affect the residential zones including R2, R3, and R4, the mixed-use zones, as well as minor changes to the commercial and industrial zone districts. We've also proposed changes to definitions within the municipal code, as well as off-street parking standards. As noted in the staff report, and it's worth mentioning here, that many of these proposed changes are based on existing regulations in comparison cities. These cities include Rancho Cucamonga, Palmdale, and Lancaster, have successfully implemented these standards into well-done development projects. In your agenda packet, these city comparisons can be found as attachment D of this item, starting on page 1048. So here we'll discuss the proposed new and modified development standards associated with residential zone districts. As referenced in the staff report and found within the draft development standards associated with the agenda packet, starting on page 946, you'll see that we're proposing replacement of the existing R2 district by renaming the existing R3 district as R2 and updating the allowable density maximum to 12 units per acre. We're also proposing replacement of the existing R3 district by renaming the existing R4 district as R3 and updating allowable density to 20 dwelling units per acre. Further, we've proposed a reduced front yard setback from 15 feet to 10 feet to promote building orientation and frontages facing the right-of-way. We've also proposed an increased building height to 45 feet to allow for 4-story construction and architectural features, while also incorporating further multi-story setbacks above the second floor, which will result in further wall plane variations. Essentially, this would ensure that a 4-story box is not developed. The proposed change in height to 45 feet is also based on feedback that we received from developers. 4 feet is the highest that wood-framed construction can go, and likely the limit of feasible construction costs in the city. The existing R4 district has been replaced with an all-new R4 district that accommodates up to 30 dwelling units per acre. This includes a minimum lot size of 5 acres to ensure sufficient area to develop for enhanced large-scale multifamily developments and integrated open space containing adequate amenities for the higher number of dwelling units proposed. Here we're proposing an increased building height to 55 feet in order to allow for construction and architectural features that can take advantage of increased densities, while also incorporating those multi-story setbacks above the second floor. Additionally, in the new R4 zone, we've proposed a reduction in private and common recreational amenity requirements based on square footage, but increased the total number of required common amenities that a project would need to provide. These open space requirements are fairly consistent with those of the city of Palmdale for a similar zone district type, as shown in Table 1 of the Comparison Cities attachment found on page 1049 of your agenda packet. Here we're proposing a revision to the entire mixed-use article of the municipal code. We've added a new general purpose and intent section that reflects the goals outlined in the land use element of the general plan, aimed at facilitating cohesive and well-integrated mixed-use projects and providing flexible development allowances for vertical mixed use, horizontal mixed use, entirely residential developments, and entirely commercial developments. We've added development standards table for the MU1 zone that reflects aspects of the R3 and C1 district development standards, as well as development standards for the MU2 zone that reflects aspects of the R4 and C2 district standards. If you're following along in your agenda packet, these are shown on page 953. Additionally, we've added fence, wall, and sound barrier requirements to reflect similar residential and commercial development requirements already found within our municipal code. We've also added a plan unit development requirement for properties over 10 acres in size. Finally, we've proposed specific mixed-use design guidelines to supplement those multifamily and commercial design guidelines already in place to ensure cohesive and interconnected mixed-use developments that implement specific design goals, objectives, and principles. As shown starting on page 958 of your agenda index, we are proposing minor changes to the commercial and industrial zone districts. These changes include the implementation of a floor area ratio, or FAR, which is determined by dividing the gross floor area of all buildings on a lot by the area of that lot. We've also proposed increased setback requirements for properties abutting residential districts based on the proposed heights of the commercial and industrial development, which aims to address concerns that have been raised at past meetings for past commercial and industrial development projects. We've revised the existing FAR definition in the municipal code to address mezzanines as specified by California Building Code. And we've proposed changes to multifamily parking standards, which you'll see on page 963. These changes to parking allow for a reduction in the number of spaces currently required for studio and one bedroom units to allow for one space per unit rather than two, which is currently required. Units with 2 to 3 bedrooms would still require only 2 parking spaces per unit. And we've now proposed an increase to 3 parking spaces per unit for each unit with 4 or more bedrooms. Additionally, we are proposing an implementation of guest or visitor parking requirements, which would equate to 1 space for every 3 units for complexes with 50 units or fewer, and 1 space for every 5 units for complexes with 51 units or greater. This slide provides some good context for the type of developments that can be achieved in each residential zoning designation. The first image reflects our single family and R2 zoning standards, which allow for smaller developments with garages accessed from the front or alleyway. The image showing 13 to 24 units per acre would be more similar to our new R3 district, which could allow for a 2 to 3 story townhome with orientation toward the street, or perhaps internally facing common open space. The 20 to 30 unit per acre image is reflective of our new R4 standards, with higher density developments that contain more common recreational amenities based on the number of units provided. And finally, though we do not have a zone district to accommodate a 40 plus dwelling unit per acre development, this image is provided to show what that type of large scale development would look like. The images on this slide show examples of the types of developments that we'll see in the revised R2 zone district now that dwelling unit density has been increased. The R2 zone is intended for duplexes, triplexes, and other smaller scale street or alleyway oriented multifamily developments. The R3 zone district will now accommodate multi-unit apartments or condominiums at a higher density than what was previously allowed for. These developments will have an emphasis on common recreational space that is sometimes indoors as opposed to outdoors, with reduced private recreational space requirements. The bottom image on the slide shows the recently adopted multifamily project off of Ridgecrest Road, which was proposed at 12.7 dwelling units per acre, on the lower end of the R3 zone allowances. The new R4 district will provide much higher density projects, but will retain larger overall lot size requirements. The multi-story setback above 2 stories will also ensure greater variation in wall planes. The increased requirement for common recreational space and amenities will ensure for a better overall product. The image at the bottom of this slide is a rendering from the recently approved Bear Valley Connection project, which is proposed at 25 dwelling units per acre. The images on this slide reflect vertical mixed-use projects with dwellings above the commercial ground floors, as well as more linear village-type mixed-use projects that are walkable and not vehicle-dependent. And with that, the city planner, assistant city planner, and I are all available for questions should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Okay, so ultimately we need to make a recommendation to city staff on all of this to move forward. But before we do that, I wanted to see if there were any questions or clarifications or any thoughts from any commissioners. The only one I had was just Clara, and you touched on it, but I just wanted to clarify because it took me a while to pull it up. Regarding the parking standards, the only thing that's been touched on any of the land uses is just the multi-family. Is that correct?
That's correct. We didn't touch any other land.
Nothing else. Is everything the same? Okay.
I just want to make a comment, add to that, which I appreciate those standards because I know generally you go to some places and it's just one parking spot, no guest parking. You're walking across the street to go visit someone. So I like that we included that. I did have one question about the agriculture residential. Since that is no longer included and it's just exclusive, do we currently, would that affect our current residents at all that have agriculture? Or they're fine as is?
They would be covered under the new district. When we looked at our zoning code years ago, probably 10 to 20 years ago, there was agricultural residential in other parts of the city. It's now limited, I think, to 1 or 2 parcels that are contiguous to agriculturally zoned property. So it just made sense rather than have a zone district exist for 2 parcels to just incorporate those into agriculture. But any land uses they have would be grandfathered.
Great, thank you. That's it.
Okay. I think I need to open the hearing. Is that right? For testimony on this? Yeah, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing on this. And if there's anyone here that would like to add the discussion or speak to us on item number 5, now's the time. And no cards, correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Then I will close the public hearing on that. And if there are no more questions or discussion, is it safe to assume that this commission recommends to staff to move forward with this to the final document for approval?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll make that recommendation.
I'll second.
Is it just a recommendation, or do we need to? Did I need to make a formal motion for that?
Recommendation is fine with me as a workshop item.
Okay, all right. Okay, that takes care of that one. So, any final thoughts or reports from commission members before we adjourn? Commissioner Thomas?
No, I just want to thank, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, for that presentation. And I'm really glad to see us moving in this direction. Very positive. Thank you. And what was her name?
Daisy Kawasaki.
I'm sorry, Daisy. I'm terrible with names, but thank you. That was a good presentation.
Commissioner Marshall, anything?
No, I don't have anything.
Commissioner Messon?
Just wanted to thank staff and then my fellow commissioners as well. I feel like we had a really good dialogue today, so it's nice to go back and forth and hopefully discuss furthermore. So thank you, and everyone have a nice night.
Thank you. And I kind of agree. I was thinking earlier when we spent that time trying to calculate on the cell tower. My very first planning commission meeting, real quick, was in 1999. Not when I was a commissioner, but that was in one of my first real estate deals that brought me to Victorville City Hall. And I experienced from the audience my first commission meeting, and all those people up there, I was fascinated and kind of blown away because they had to spend 40 minutes, kind of doing what we were doing tonight. And it had to do, I remember it had to do with a fence and the amount of light that was coming through this chain link or slatted type fence. And they went back and forth with calculators, and I thought it was getting kind of a little bit overkill and overanalyzing, and I thought it was a little weird. And tonight when we were doing this, I was like, oh wow, I went through that from the audience one time. I hope people don't think we're overanalyzing, but I agree with Commissioner Messon. You know, sometimes we can burn through the meetings and get things done. And sometimes these things, the littlest things, can be so important to set precedent. And it shows, you know, that Victorville is business friendly, but within, you know, within reason. So thank you all for that. And then the reports from staff.
Thank you, Chair Kurth. I just wanted to report out that the City Council did adopt a recent ordinance on the accessory dwelling units and the recreational vehicle parking. I just wanted to let you know that your recommendation was approved. And also just want to let the commission know that our fall festival is coming up on October 7th. Hope to see you out there. Planning will have a booth.
Okay, thank you for that update. And then with that, I will say meeting adjourned. Thank you all.